Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah, the topic of this presentation is the wealth of nations, in fact. And as before, there is one body part involved. It's not invisible hand this time. So this study was was an empirical study that tried to sort of look how the average size of the male organ is related to economic growth. And hopefully, well, next slide, please. Yeah. So it's a pretty basic growth empirical study that uses a Mankiw-Romer whale, so sort of really de facto empirical growth model as its basis. And I have augmented the data with this male organ and some political variables as well. And I concentrate as the original paper to some non-oil producing countries. And the time span ranges for 1960 to 1985. So this is really an established framework. It has been used in tons of papers around. Okay. It's really, this is the technology I'm trying to, the A term in the growth regression. So when you do this kind of growth empirics, you take you take the outcome variables like here this GDP in 1985 or the growth rate in between certain periods. And then you have certain explanatory variables, which you can see here. There are the really original variables found in the Mankiw-Romer whale, and then you have the male organ there. And I would like you to concentrate just on the bold figures, and not actually in the numbers, because they are not too relevant. But just look at the stars, those black stars. They resemble, or they illustrate the statistical significance of this variable. And note that, for example, I don't want to insult any political scientists here, but note that the political variable does not have too much significance. So democracy or authoritarianism doesn't really matter here. But the point is that with this kind of setup, you really easily get this kind of really significant variables showing up, and it's statistically very robust. And this is this was the quadratic, so it looked it looked the GDP in 1985, and this is how it, broadly speaking, this is how it looks. So on the horizontal axis we have this male organ. It's the average size in the country, and there we have the 1985 GDP in purchase power parity. And here you can see how the GDP collapses at the both ends of the male organ spectrum, as I called it. Sorry for that. And as there was, I don't know whether you have looked at the paper, but there is this optimizing size. It's about 13.5 centimeters, based on sort of eyeball econometrics. So, yes, I randomized those labels because you can't have all. So Netherlands was the unlucky one, or lucky one, I don't know, in this respect. Okay, but this already the male organ explains something like 15% of the variation in 1985 GDP. And then when we look at the this really is disagreeing. The growth rates. So we look 1960 between 1985, this GDP expansion in various countries. Here you see how it goes. And let me clarify that, as you can see on the left-hand side, on the small male organ part, there is a lot of Asian countries. And on the right-hand side, there are a lot of African countries. And you might agree with me if I say that this might sort of drive the results, but yeah. But this is how it goes when you put those variables. Then in any sort of paper, you have to have some kind of interpretations. And I came up with something like self-esteem production. It's something like, I won't go into details. It's a Freudian type of thing where the marginal utility of income is decreasing in income. And that explains the patterns found. You can't actually falsify because it's sort of exposed interpretation based on the data. So, and the second interpretation is testosterone risk-taking. So there are papers that link male organ to testosterone. Well, I'm not a biologist by training, but there are these kind of papers. And then again, testosterone to risk-taking or aggressiveness. So in that sense, you could think that I'm actually regressing risk-taking or aggressiveness and the male organ and the economy. And all what is said about the male organ is actually attributable to risk-taking behavior. But the point here is that I don't believe to these two first explanation at all, for sure. But I guess this is a pretty nice example of this kind of spurious correlation, that there is something that that is confounding with those variables. I don't know what, but it's quite clear that there is something going on, and actually the male organ does not explain too much of the variation, but there is still something, omitted variables or whatever, that might actually explain the patterns found. And so this has been pretty sort of humorous until this point, I guess. Jesus, it's all right. So this is a humorous paper, as I said, but there is a small, really tiny sort of serious point here. So we have a robust statistical association. It's pretty clear, and most likely there are some male organ, some unobserved variables in the male organ, and I'm pretty sure that the causality is non-existent. If there is causality, then this will be a really seminal paper, but I really do not expect that to see this kind of thing. But the key thing is that there are tons of papers using the exact same data, exact same framework, and they have found something like, I guess, 130 to 140 factors that contribute to economic growth in this same setting. And I have listed few of those just randomly. Well, not completely randomly, but to show some examples. Few of them, like the cricket, I guess it's pretty humorous and not too serious as this mine variable. But many of those are actually pretty seriously done, and they are good published studies. Well, there is a huge discussion among economists what these things actually measure and how we should interpret these findings. And all economists know that these regressions are pretty dubious. And this paper, what I've done is all the findings there, all the insights are actually completely clear to all economists, and I hope to all political scientists as well. So there is conceptually, there is nothing new. But I guess the contribution, if you can call it so, is the fact that there is now a sort of colorfully, linguistically written example of how these things can go very, very wrong. And of course, I guess it can facilitate it can be a pedagogically good example of how things should actually not be done. And in fact, for many people, you can then also ask whether or it could facilitate some criticism against these other studies, which are supposedly really serious, but I guess for some part they could suffer from the exact same detriments or problems as my male organ paper. So I guess there is not much contribution in bringing this, because it's statistic. This problem is sort of statistics 101 type of thing. Everyone knows it. It's no secret. But I guess really the contribution is to show it off in this kind of pretty sort of linguistically interesting setting. I don't know whether you have read the paper, but there are some infantile puns which try to make the point that I'm not too serious about the causality part. But yeah, I guess that's the in really condensed version what I wanted to say about the paper.